everyone, welcome to today's video. I lost track of what day this is in India. The title will tell you though. Unfortunately, you will have to deal with the flashing lights a little bit more today. I found out a reason of why this might be happening. One of the other people in the tour group told me yesterday. Most of the light bulbs in the United States operate at 60 hertz, which is the frequency in which the energy goes through the lights to make them work. And I use an iPad that's properly calibrated to that amount of frequency as well. And so the effects cancel each other out and it looks more static than it actually is. Meanwhile, here, both in Jaipur and Agra, the lights that have been flashing at 50 hertz, which means that it's now out of sync with my filming device. So that's why the lights are flashing. I'm sorry that you're gonna have to go through probably a couple more videos of the lights going like this, but my back let me know that it did not like being squeezed under that thing yesterday, and I am in such pain. For context purposes of this video, if I seem off today, it's because I received news from back home that has led to another sudden obliteration of expectation moment for me, which it's not my first time having one of these moments, but it's the third time I've had such a moment in 2024, and it's rough. Today's date was November 6, 2024. The election votes are being counted, and at this point, with the electoral votes counted, the fascist won. I can't say that I'm surprised because it's happened before. I lived through his presidency before, but it's another sudden obliteration of expectation again, because the fascist has promised that we'll never have another election again. While he is a chronic liar, that's too extreme of a statement to not take at face value. I fully believe him when he says that particular statement, especially since the candidate who has won, the fascist, for the election he lost, he launched a terrorist attack on the Capitol. He has been impeached twice during his first term, and he has over 34 felonies to his name. He couldn't even vote for himself, and he won. I don't feel comfortable having the fascists in charge of our nuclear warheads because I wouldn't even trust him with a match. But yeah, I'm disappointed in my country. I'm particularly disappointed in my state, the state of Pennsylvania, because our electoral votes went towards him. And I'm terrified for the future because since America decided this election to vote for the racist and misogynist parties, the next 4 years are going to be more dangerous both for me and the people that I care about, because the policies that the people supporting the fascists want to put in place would only be beneficial to rich white men, which is a very, very small subsection of the United States. I'm trying not to let this affect my trip. I'm in India right now because I don't think I could cope with the intensity of the emotions that the rest of my country are going to be going through. A lot of the expectations of civility that would have been in place if the other candidate had won are gone. I don't expect this guy to be civil. He never has been. But yeah, I don't want to spend too much of the video on this, but I do think it's important that you know where I'm coming from. So if I do seem like I'm not fully there or I'm disassociating, this is also in the forefront of my mind. My phone has been the quietest today that it's been in over a year, and I thought it would make me feel better, but it didn't. I was on a mission from the moment that I was going to go down to breakfast. Last night, after I finished filming, I went to go have supper in the restaurant, and I ended up running into multiple people from the group, and one of the ladies ended up leaving her wallet behind at the table. So I took her wallet with the intention to give it back to her the next day. I tried to find out her room number, but I didn't see it in time before breakfast. So I brought her wallet down, I handed it to the head of our tour group. And then when she came down, the lady ended up asking me if I seen her wallet. I told her that it was with our head of our tour group, and she was very, very grateful. Later on in the day, she offered me a Pepto-Bismol. This lady's already experienced some stomach troubles this trip, so I knew it was a big deal offering me one of those for returning her wallet. But I'm very, very thankful that she has it back. And she's like, yeah, I knew either someone from the group took it or the hotel staff took it. And if the hotel staff took it, they would have called me. So I'm glad that she was not concerned about her wallet and that she was trusting the universe that it would get it back to her. Because yeah, this is not a place that you would want to lose your money. I had breakfast with 2 other people from the group, and I had a mixed plate today, so I got to experience some more peanut butter with the bread, and I had some honey. I tried some dal and the bread that goes with it. It was all right. It wasn't too spicy, but I'm glad that I tried it. And I also had some juice. I couldn't find plain curd at first. I was nervous about not finding it because that is my strategy for staying healthy when I'm in countries where I'm not familiar with the food. But someone else had managed to find it that I was eating with, so she told me where she saw it. Next to the plain curd was this weird thing. It reminded me of gok from Star Trek, like what the Klingons eat, just the way that it looked, and it was like, okay, this isn't alive, but when I bit into it, it tasted like honey. It was honey that was fried in a tube. It was delicious. I had a blueberry muffin, which was delicious. I also had a chocolate donut. I didn't realize till after I put the tongs to it that it had coconut on it. I don't like coconut flakes. They're a sensory nightmare for me, but I managed to still enjoy the donut. It was a very nice conversation during breakfast, and then I went back up to the room, brushed my teeth, got my bag ready for the day, then went down into the lobby, and we went on the road up to the Amber Palace. So the Amber Palace used to be the capital of the area. It was the capital of the area for 100 years, from like 1100 to 1700. From there, the last ruler that was in the Amber Palace is like Japsine or something like that. And he, on the advice of his advisors, ended up moving the capital to where Jaipur is today. With that, he ended up being responsible for building the city and having the city named after him. Jaipur is called the Temple City because it has over 1,000 temples in it. It's also called the Pink City because they used a lot of pink sandstone to build it. And they used pink because pink is a very welcoming color. But we ended up driving through the town, and on our way there, we ended up driving through the market. What was interesting about the market was we were told right before we're going to go in that this is the real India. This was the old city of Jaipur. A lot of it is the new development that we've been driving around, but this was the original part of the city, and it was exquisitely decorated. It's on a red stone, and there were a bunch of white paint on the stones, and beautiful designs, and the white paint was bright. It turns out that the white paint is reapplied quite often. Also on our way there, I saw quite a few people sweeping with these huge straw brooms. Turns out the government employs them and that they pay them good money to help keep the streets of Jaipur clean. There are a lot less piles of trash in Jaipur than I was seeing in Agra and Delhi. We ended up driving up towards the Amber Palace, and we could see it off from the distance, and there's a fort near it too, a fort a little bit higher up on the hill. But on our way there, just before we went through there, we went through a monkey sanctuary, like a wildlife sanctuary. We were told that there were leopards in there as well. We didn't see any leopards because they're incredibly shy of humans, and also they're nocturnal. It's like, wow, it's good that they have a lot of place for them to just be. But when we got off from the bus, we were all shuffled over to wait in order to take some jeeps. We'd take up the jeeps some of the way, and then those who wanted to ride the elephants would end up taking the elephants there, but those who just wanted to ride the jeep would end up taking a jeep the rest of the way up. We got some nice pictures of the Amber Palace from where we were standing, but then we were once again surrounded by hawkers trying to sell us goods. Slightly different goods. There was a drum that gave music. There's also someone playing some sort of flute. Later on, I could see it was someone pretending to be a snake charmer because he had the snake in the pot. Someone else in the group told me that it was a rubber snake, it wasn't an actual snake, and you can see he put the lid down and the snake just collapsed in. If the snake actually had a living, breathing conscious, it would have moved in a different way. It wouldn't have been quite so floppy. But we're absolutely surrounded, and we just had to say no, just no, over and over again. I was often saying no thank you, no thank you. It's absolutely annoying for us. But I think what's worse about it for me is the fact that this is their livelihood. This is how they make money. It's not a pleasant way to be making money. It's a very rough way and a very low benefit way to be making money. even when we went into the Jeeps, we were still being approached by the hawkers with their goods. Even if people wanted some of the stuff, we were told to say no, because once people see you buy things, others will come and they will keep on asking you to buy things. Some of them were umbrellas this time too. There were some very nice umbrellas. One of the other people I was with is like, it's hard to be saying no when I want to be saying yes to some of these people, because some of the things are nice. And the other people I was sitting with were older, and in the Jeep, there was one lady who was very direct with no, and she's also putting up her hand like no. And some of the other people in the group, since they're not listening to our words, they're having to use their limbs to go like no. But then the Jeep started going up the hill, and it was a very nice Jeep ride. The seats were facing inwards, so it's like you're not looking out the window, you're facing each other, and you can see behind the other person what the sights are. But you could also see out the back was open too. And honestly, if we weren't being surrounded by people trying to hawk us goods, it would be an absolutely fun vehicle to ride in. But then we made our way up, and we were once again being interacted with the hawkers who found us towards the top. We were told ahead of time that people will want to take our pictures. They will try to sell us the pictures. And we were told if they try to sell you the pictures, only 100 rupees per picture. Like if they're asking for 2,000, it's too much. But we were missing a vital bit of information there. Because they won't sell you a single picture, they'll sell you an album. And if you try to do it so you buy only 1 or 2 pictures, they won't do it. It's either the whole thing or nothing. And they only accept cash. They do not accept credit card, which means that I had gotten $40 changed into rupees. I used up nearly all my rupees in cash at the Amber Palace today. I was not expecting that from that location. But the one thing I can't deny is that the pictures are good. The pictures were good quality pictures. They had good cameras. But we got in line for the elephants, and we could see the elephants. The way that the elephants are situated is they have a saddle. They have a saddle that goes on them. And then there is an elephant seat that goes on top of the saddle. The way that you're sitting in it is you're actually sitting side saddle. So you're not facing the top front of the elephant, you're facing the side of it. And then there's a person sitting on the elephant's neck who is the elephant driver, and he's holding a stick and he's poking the elephant with a bamboo stick to guide the elephant which way to go. I'm guessing the feet aren't enough of a deterrent from there. When you're on the elephant, people will ask you for your picture. And it's like, well, I mean, I might as well, yeah. If I don't like the photos, I don't buy. They told us to pair up before we went on. It's like, find a partner. There were some ladies who did not come on the elephant ride. There are 3 people who stayed back at the hotel. So we were already an odd number group of people going there. And then our tour guide went with the people who went in the Jeep. So there were 4 people in the Jeep, which means that there was an odd number of people in the elephant. So I was the person who did not have a partner. I did come on this trip alone, I knew, but it was like, oh, I don't get to ride with somebody, okay. But also it's like, you know what? I can rock riding the elephant by myself. That's fine. I've gotten on a horse by myself. How's an elephant much different? When you sit on the elephant, you go on a ledge, and then you lean back into the elephant, and then there's a metal bar that kind of holds it. And the metal bar is very similar to what would come down if you go on a ski lift like this, except it's more on a hinge. I ended up asking the guide, how often does the elephant go up and down during the day? And I think he said like 11 times. After that, they're done. I'm not sure if I understood that correctly, but I think that was the case. The elephant's name was Gudibimar. I think it was Gudibimar. He was a very good elephant. There are a couple times he wanted to go to the wall. He didn't want to go in a certain direction, and he had to be prodded with the stick. But an elephant is very, very rocky. Again, I do not like mentioning the magic turf, but it reminded me of the description of riding a hippogriff. It wasn't smooth. It was like back and forth, like going back and forth like this to a stronger degree than I experienced on the horse. So I've had to learn to rock with the elephant, and I held on to the carriage a little bit, but then people took my picture, and there were 2 separate photographers who really got my attention. And the first one was right when I got on the elephant, and the second one was a little bit further up the wall. Some of the other ladies in the group made sure to get a picture of me on the elephant, and I took a picture of some of the other ladies. The person driving the elephant for me pointed out some gardens on the way, probably for a picture opportunity, and so I took a picture there. There's still people trying to hawk me items while I was riding the elephant, and it's like, oh my gosh, would you even be able to reach the money? Would you even be able to hand the item up to me? What is the point? It's an elephant quilt, and if I heard the guy right, he was trying to sell the elephant quilt for 50 rupees, which is way under what a quilt is worth. Even 500 rupees is less than what a quilt is worth. But we went up the wall, and the palace gates of the wall are just the right height for the elephant. It's just high enough that you can see the humans riding the elephants, but you can just barely see the tops of the elephants. We ended the market ride in the plaza, the main plaza that was there to welcome people who were coming into the Amber Palace. As we started getting closer to the elephant wall where we were dismount, the driver started asking me for money for a tip. I was like, wait, I'm supposed to tip you? Because the ride was already paid for by the group. I guess he was expecting like 100 rupees per person for a ride, but since I was by myself, he wanted 200. I tried to negotiate down to 100. I gave him 100, but he wasn't happy with that. He still kept asking for 200. I ended up giving him 200 and he dropped me off. He tried asking for 300 so the elephant could have a banana. 200 he was happy with. So after that, I got off the elephant. I thanked him for the ride, and then I turned and saw a line that said no tips please. I was like, okay, is what it is, yeah. I ended up following the group down, and we went down the stairs, and the hawkers found us immediately. I looked for our tour guide and just went straight towards him to try to avoid any hawkers along the way as they're asking us for stuff. We ended up going to the shade underneath the tree, and I see that our position for standing was chosen because it was right next to a police car. So it's like, using the law to avoid hawkers coming up to us. The police ended up driving away. But some people from our group ended up asking the police for photos, which they kindly obliged. I found the inside of the police vehicle interesting. They had a marigold garland and some turf inside there. But one of the first set of pictures ended up finding me, and I got the pictures, and the second photographer's like, remember me, remember my name, Johan. The first book, the guy came up with me to the book, and he tried asking for 2,000. He tried asking for 1,000, and I said no. I looked through the pictures, and it's just 5 pictures. No. Someone else asked me, and I said no, and someone came up for a third time and asked for just 500. It's like, you know what? Yeah, okay. It's half the price. So I paid 500, I got the pictures. Then I asked one of the other ladies to hold the book for me, so I would not be a target to the hawkers. In the process of getting this book, our tour guide was moving up to get our tickets, and I thought he went up the stairs. I found out later that he went up the ramp. So I went up the stairs, I look around, and suddenly I see no one in our group except the lady who had stayed behind in the courtyard because she didn't want to walk. I was like, oh, great, I'm lost. I technically have the phone number of both our tour guide and the person in charge of our tour group, but it's like, I don't know where they are. So I saw slightly ahead of me, there was a place where I could look out over the plaza because the stairs were recessed into the palace, and there's a drum playing in the courtyard as well. And I was like, oh, let me look there and look around and see if I can find. So I don't see anyone in the courtyard, but I turn around and I see behind there's a recess thing, and I see the purple hair of someone else in my group. It's like, that's where they are. So I go down, and the tour guide was counting. Thankfully, I caught up with the group before they went in. And that's when I had one of the ladies in the tour group hold the book for me. We were staying outside a temple. There was like no photography or video with the temple, but they were playing this very loud music, and he was giving us some information about the temple. But then we ended up going through a metal detector with a ticket. He had the ticket, and I just followed him. He took us up to the receiving hall of the king. So there was a king, and the king had 12 wives, and each of the 12 wives had a separate bedroom. They all had 2 bedrooms. They had a bedroom that was lower to the ground during the winter, and a bedroom that was higher up during the summer, during monsoon season. So that way the summer bedrooms didn't get flooded, and they experienced breezes going through it, so it stayed nice and cool, while bedrooms that were down below had less windows and were blocked, so more wind couldn't really go through. We had 2 separate stops inside, and each time we were told 10 minutes. We were really rushed through the Amber Palace, and honestly, it was the right pace. Now, the first area we were given the king's receiving hall, so we could see the place where the king would receive guests. There were like white pillars and surrounded by redstone, and there was also this room that was a mirror mosaic room that we went in. I'm forgetting what buildings were where, but there's this mirror mosaic room where all the mosaics were mirrors, and it gave this absolutely luxurious effect, and it was well done. There was a place with a little garden with a fountain and hedges and whatnot. There were things telling us not to go in it, but we did catch someone going to take a picture in it anyway. There's also a place where you could go higher and look back out over the crowd and also see up one of the tunnels. We were told if we went up to not go to the other side, but stay on the side closer to us at the time. As I went in, I got stopped by a lady and she said photo, which I think she was like photo of her. I couldn't really tell if it was like, do you want to take a photo of me or do you want me to take a photo of you? I think she just wanted me to take a photo of you, and then she was like, money. So I paid her like 100 rupees for the photo. She happened to have one of the brooms and she guided me along the way, and I went up, and when I went up, there's a lot of beautiful architecture. There were a lot of wedding parties who were taking photographs up there, and you could tell there were wedding parties because the women wear saris, and the saris always look like dressed up to the nines, but the men were dressed up to the nines too. They were wearing the very fancy male formal wear. I'm not sure what the proper names are. The walls were frescoed. It was an incredible example of frescoes designs, and they're all like flowers and very curly designs, very figurative. There weren't any figures that you would see like in Europe, human faces or whatnot. It was all just decorative, like flowers and whatnot. A lot of the paint was fading, and some of it was just relief work. It wasn't even painted. There was also just relief carved into stone, and there were lots of little windows. There weren't too many big windows. Probably the biggest was about around the Amber Palace. There's about 1,000 kilometers worth of wall that was there to guard the city. You could see the fence in the distance. We were told that we could go through the bridal rooms as well. So we were told about the king's bedroom, and the king's bedroom is higher up than the wives' bedrooms. Like the king's bedroom, both the summer and the winter are high up, although the winter one is lower than the summer one. I think they're called the sun and moon rooms. But then the wives have upper and lower rooms. We were told that we could go explore the inside of the room. So I was like, oh, we can go inside the rooms? Okay. So I just entered one of the rooms. You could see some people actually going up. It's like, well, I guess you can go up any set of stairs, right? So I go up a set of stairs and I start photographing the room that I'm in. No, first I start down below. I start down below in the winter room. And I think I may have been in the bedroom. Someone else said it may have been the kitchen, if there was like a plaque there somewhere. I ended up going into a room and seeing the room, and then there's another room inside the room that's a little bit more dark, and there's a dome in the ceiling, and there are shelves built into the wall. It's relief into the wall, and there's about 6 or 8 of them in the entire room. It was nice and cool in there. Then I saw a staircase, and it's like, well, this must be the upper room. It's a very steep staircase, so I go up the staircase, I start going there, and then I'm approached by a gentleman who called himself Sam, and he's like, here, let me help you get good pictures. So I'm looking around. I just wanted to look around by myself. I didn't necessarily want, but it's like, okay, he's guiding me. I end up looking through the rooms, and they're lighter rooms. They're a little bit bigger rooms, and he's guiding me towards pictures of the marketplace and different angles. It's like, okay. It's interesting going through the rooms because they're mostly the same, but they're painted differently. Some of the room had green paint on the bottom, and some of the room had red paint on the bottom. But typically the way that it was painted was the room would be split in half, and the bottom half would be painted a different color, and the top half was left with the grayish color. That was the building material that the palace was made out of. And so he guided me around a corner, and he tried to guide me further around, but I ended up saying no. He led me really fast to the room. He was like, no, I want video footage of the rooms that we'd already passed by. Also, we had 10 minutes total, so I already knew I couldn't stay for very long. He's like, here, let me bring you up another level. There was a 3rd level. So there's a wooden slat over half the staircase, and we went up the 3rd level, and he showed me like, this is an excellent view of the fort, and he was right, it was an excellent view, and I saw it, and then he brought me back. Like I said, I had to get back to my group, and he was like, no money. He was expecting a tip, so I paid him like 500 rupees because that was the smallest bill. I didn't have any hundreds, and handing him 50 seemed cheap. He was like, thank you. He was like, don't tell security. So it's like, oh, we weren't supposed to be here. So I go back down the stairs, and then I go towards the group and realize I'm the last one to reach there. And then we start exiting the Amber Palace, and we end up getting approached by hawkers again through our exit. And we're having to say no, no, no. At one point, our tour guide said, walk fast. I have no problem with walking fast, but there were a fair amount of people in our group do. It's like, you can only go as fast as your slowest person, yeah? We end up going down a long tunnel, stopping by a bookshop, and one of the people in the group saw a book about pashmina shawls, and he's like, I need to see that book. And he's like, okay, 10 minutes in the bookshop, and a couple other people went in, and she ended up leaving with the book about pashmina shawls. I didn't go into the bookshop. I was feeling worried about the amount of rupees that I had left, because I knew that I was going to be approached by the person who took the other pictures of me, the pictures I was curious about seeing. I was worried about that. I didn't really want to be approached by anyone else though. But we were told to wait in the corner, and then we were told, you can go explore the tunnel. And it's like, what? We ended up like walking down the tunnel. We weren't entirely sure what we were doing, but we were told you can walk to the tunnel, but don't go down the tunnel because it's not safe. It's like, oh, okay. So I walk down the tunnel and I see it. Apparently the tunnel is where people used to go to escape. They were under siege. This was the secret passage out, that they only excavated it like 20 years ago or 40 years ago. Right across the entrance of the tunnel was a huge bowl. Apparently this bowl was responsible for feeding 800 and 900 people that lived in the fort when the fort was still active as an actual fort and not just as a sightseeing attraction. And there was one point where our tour guide pointed and went, oh, look, it's a dinosaur egg. We were like, I'm looking at it, it's like it's stone. It's like, okay, I guess people saw this and thought dinosaur egg because it's a round oval, but no, it's like, JK, it's just a water tank. And then we ended up walking to our jeeps. We were going to be taking the jeeps the whole way back. The person who took the pictures of me found me, and he had the 20 pictures of me, and the pictures were good, but then he wanted 2,000 rupees for it, and I only had 553 rupees at that moment. And it was like, sorry, I can't afford it. Unless you are willing to accept 500 rupees, I can't afford this. And he's like, well, what about your American cash? And it's like, I left my wallet on the bus. I've been in the habit of leaving my wallet on the bus. He's like, I'm a student. I need to pay this for school. And it was just nonstop. He would not take no for an answer. And so one of the other ladies went to our tour guide like, hey, she really needs help here. So he's asking for pictures, and it's like, well, you want the pictures? It's like, yeah, I just don't have the rupees. So he offered to lend me money for the rupees. So I ended up paying him 1,000, and then he gave it to me. And so now I have 25 total photos of me riding an elephant, which I would have been happy with one. I didn't really need 25, but one of the pictures had me do the Nixon pose. So that's funny, actually. I think he was just trying to make me go kawaii, like cute kawaii girl with that. But for me, my instinct is like, it's Nixon. He also had me do like a heart and the namaste with the pictures. I ended up calculating how many rupees that was, and then gave the tour guide the equivalent in American money when we got back to the bus. But we got into the Jeep, and in addition to the hawkers this time, we were approached by people begging for money. They were going like this for food, like food, food, food. And it's like, no, sorry. Unfortunately, you can't give it to one person because then other people will surround you. So we went up to the Jeep, and one person literally went into the Jeep through the window, and one of the ladies was just not having it. She was like, no, go away. And the girl was just there asking for food, and the lady sitting next to me ended up like putting her foot out to try to get them to go away. We just ended up having to ignore them, unfortunately. As annoying as it is for me, I feel even worse for them, because this is the only way that they have to get food. What really was shocking to me was the fact that the Jeep had to back up in order to get to a point where he could drive. As the Jeep backed up, these two girls were standing there. The Jeep was moving closer to them, and I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to run over? I ended up yelling, careful, to the girls to move out of the way. And the fact that they are that hungry that they are willing to get run over by a Jeep for the promise of food is a very stark reflection of what their reality is like. This is what they're doing to survive. If I had to be in their situation, I guess I would be doing the same thing, but I can't picture myself doing that. To be fair, it never even occurred to me, let me borrow money from someone else to buy this thing. I don't know why it felt like such a sin to do that. It felt like such a bad thing for me to borrow money from somebody else. But we ended up riding, and it was a very noisy ride. The horn was honking quite frequently. It's not just an Agra thing, it's an all over India thing. You honk your horn, it turns out. There are several times the Jeep just stopped completely. The engine got turned off, and they're like, oh, why is it going? But I didn't really worry about it too much because it was probably just congestion. I didn't bring a bottle of water with me into the Amber Palace, but I knew once I got back to the bus, I needed to get a drink of water. I was also thankful that we didn't take the elephants on the ride down, because even though the ride would have been fun, I didn't want to have to face the idea of giving a tip again, especially since I knew I had less money. I was not expecting to lose the majority of my rupees at Amber Palace. We went into the bus. There were curtains on the bus. In Delhi, it is illegal to keep the curtains closed because of a woman getting raped in there at one point. But in other parts of India, you are allowed to pull the curtains closed. And the curtains were closed there. And it was like the first time I thought I could deal with the curtains being closed for a little bit. Just bring the sensory overload a bit down. Because I know I am neurodivergent. I know I have sensory issues, and getting overwhelmed by a lot of people like that. It's a type of overwhelm that most people would go like, well, understandably, you're overwhelmed. Anyone would be. But it hits differently when you're neurodivergent. But yeah, on our way back, we ended up like getting water, and I got another extra water, and it was cold, but I already had like water there, and the person's like, you want me to take that back? I was like, no, I'm gonna drink them both. So the warmer water, I put the hydration salts in it, and I drank that straight down. The second bottle of water, I drank a fair amount of it too. On our way to our next stop, we ended up stopping 10 minutes by the Lake Palace. So there's a palace near the Amber Palace that is completely in the middle of a lake. The bottom 2 floors are completely underwater. It reminds me of Lemony Snicket in the penultimate book. I think it's called something like The Penultimate Peril, where they have to go to this special room and the hotel is underwater and they have to go underwater. Something along those lines. This palace was that thing. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. You would have to have access to a boat. We were told not to go in because there are crocodiles in the water. So it's not safe to swim. It used to be kept well, but the government didn't keep up with it. So now it's in disrepair and you can't really visit it. But we were also told that there would be hawkers and to just ignore them. Don't even interact. And so we didn't even talk with the lady who was trying to sell us a necklace today. Yeah, we went back inside the bus to our next stop, which was the first of the craft people that we were going to be seeing today. It didn't take very long for us to make it to the gem factory. It was a very quick ride. When we made it to the gem factory, we were told that there were bathrooms available, and I decided to use it because I knew I probably needed to use it since I had downed almost 2 bottles of water. It was a case of there were separate rooms for he or she, but we ended up using both, even though most of the people using it were women, because they were single-cell cubicles and it didn't really matter. I was afraid of potentially missing part of the demonstration, and I did. I thought it wouldn't necessarily start until after we got there, but is what is. So I didn't necessarily hear everything that the person who was talking about all the information said, but what I did do was I stared pretty heavily at the people who were actually doing the things. After the demonstration, people went into the shop, and then after I finished what I was doing in the shop, I ended up going back out and staring very closely at what they were doing again. So I have a sense of how they were cutting these gems. What they do is they have a bunch of rough, unpolished gems. These were little itty bitty tiny gems. They were working with sapphires today. What they do is they have these long wooden sticks. On the long wooden stick, one end is coated with wax, and the gem is placed on the end with the wax. That way, the gem is solidly attached to the wooden stick until the wax is melted. Then it's passed off to another person. So these steps are done like in a factory assembly line style, where one person's responsible for one job and then another person's responsible for a different job. So the next place that they go to from there is the sharpening stone. The sharpening stone was surrounded by a bunch of sponges, and there was a little wall around it, and there was a little bit of a tube that went up, and water was dripping down onto the stone. So it was dripping down, and then it was going around, and the sponge kind of spread it out so that way the stone was sufficiently wet, which makes sense because I remember when I was learning about using a pocket knife in scouting, when we were sharpening it, we were often told you need the sharpening stone and you wet the stone before you sharpen the knife. So the sharpening wheel's spinning around super fast, and the guy is holding all the little gems to the sharpening stone and chiseling away different sides so it gets that nice faceted shape that you're used to seeing with jewelry. And these were like super tiny, which is probably meant to go into like rings or pins or whatnot. From there, they go to another stone, which is the polishing stone. The polishing stone has some sort of liquid on it. It was like a white powder that the person added water to, and he used it to coat the stone. It lasts for a long while. I only saw him apply it once while I was there. But then he goes over the different sides that were already cut and polishes them so they're nice and shiny. When the person was attaching the stones to the stick to begin with, whatever the process was, it happened inside a metal can that looked like a coffee can or a paint can. I'm not sure if any stone tumbling happened. There seemed to be a machine that could have been that, but I'm not entirely sure. From there, we went into the store, and I don't really wear jewelry all that much. I do have some jewelry, although a fair amount of my jewelry collection are things that I don't wear, but I have trouble giving away because they have a very sentimental value. Even though they're things that are no longer within my style, I still remember the goodwill of the person who gave it to me, and that makes it very hard to give away. But I found myself looking around. It's like, all right, I know I don't want to get something too expensive. I found myself drawn towards the rings, which was strange. I don't really wear rings ever, mostly because most of my rings fit my ring finger, and when people see that, they assume I'm married, and that's not an assumption I want them to be having because I am not married. It's harder to find someone if they look at your finger and think you're married, right? I found a ring that fits on my pinky finger instead, and I was originally drawn by an octopus ring. I was drawn by some of the gaudier rings because, hey, why not, right? And I asked to look at the ring. There was also a bunch of crystal stones. I saw them, but while I did like the idea of the crystal stones, none of them personally appealed to me. But I looked at the octopus ring and I asked to see it, and the person who sold the rings explained it very well. It was diamonds with black oxidized silver and 2 sapphires for the eyes, but then he pulled up the price in rupees. I used my app to convert it to dollars. The ring was over $1,000, close to $2,000, and I was like, ooh, I do not have the budget for this. I do not have the budget for this at all. And he tried to offer it, and I was like, sorry, no, I can't do that. It's like, well, let's look at some smaller rings. And then I was like, wait, can I see the butterfly ring? He was like, yeah, the butterfly ring has less stones, but it still has that gaudy effect. And when he calculated the price, it was a little over $100. I was like, okay, I can manage that. So this is the ring. It has diamonds in it and it is gold. I think there's some silver in this as well, but it's an adjustable ring. I can tighten it if I want to make it go tighter. See, looks pretty nice on me. They do send the jewelry back to the States for you if you want to mail it, but since I only had the ring box, I'm perfectly okay taking this with me by myself. But I'm not going to start wearing it until I'm back home in the States. I don't really want to wear jewelry as a tourist. This is the very first time that I've bought a piece of jewelry for myself that required a certificate of authenticity. So I have that for the ring now, and it's like, wow, I guess I did an adult thing. While we were in the gem shop, in order to make us feel more at home, they had a collection of water and soda bottles, and they had some samosas for us and these silver-coated cashews treats. I was told that the cashew treats were good, so I tried one. It wasn't my favorite, but the texture at least didn't throw me off. They also had a thumbs up soda. I was like, ooh, what's that? So the thumbs up soda looks like it's a Pepsi. It's not a Pepsi. It could taste very similarly to it, but also reminds me of the Cien Otto that I had in Italy. We ended up going up to an Indian restaurant. It had Indian food available, but it also had more Western options available. I decided to go for the Indian food because I know that the restaurant here at the hotel is largely a buffet, and if I go to a buffet, I'm going to get a collection of objects I'm familiar with and objects that I am going to try. It wasn't going to be like a straight Indian meal. I found a sweet lassi, and I also had cheese naan. So instead of having plain, the cheese was baked into the naan, and I also had chicken jack verti, I think it was. A nice amount. I knew it would be enough food to keep me. It ended up not being terribly spicy, which was good. It was one of those meals that it starts off relatively mild, but it gets hotter and hotter and hotter the more you eat it, which was not quite a sensation I've had before because I'm not really in the habit of eating spicy meals. I think it was quite an experience. Our tour guide ended up telling me that if I wanted to eat my food the way that the Indians do, instead of eating it straight from the bowl, which was what I was doing, I needed to take it out and put it on the plate and then use the naan to scoop the bread up. So I did some of that and it made it easier to find the chicken, and thankfully the chicken was boneless. So I didn't have to worry about that sensory nightmare with the bones. And it was during lunch that people started checking the election news and someone mentioned that Trump had won. But then at that point, he had only had 267 electoral votes. So it was like, well, it ain't over until the fat lady sings, right? We still have to count things. At the end of the lunch, when they took our bill, we were told that the charge machine was broken and we had to pay in cash. I only had 80 rupees in cash. I cannot pay for this in cash, and I can't pay unless you let me charge the card. And someone's like, well, do you want me to lend you money? And it's like, well, yeah, thank you. It's like, I can pay. It was like 10,000 something, so 1,028. So she paid the 28. I gave the guy 50, and he kept the change, which is like, okay, the change is pennies. But I felt embarrassed saying I can't pay for this, even though the truth was I had the money, but I couldn't get it into the format that they want. We were told they would accept card, and they did accept somebody else's card. So I think it got fixed, but it was very frustrating. It soured the meal for me a little bit. I ended up converting it to rupees, even though I feel embarrassed about that. When I translated it to rupees, the amount was literally $12. If I was at home and a meal only cost $12, I'd be thrilled. Be such a good deal, and I still think it was such a good deal. I just don't like the fact that they weren't able to accept my card at that particular moment in time. I wasn't the only one who had that problem as well. When I got back to the bus, I was able to pay the person back in the American money, and she was like, can you pay me in rupees? It's like, if I could pay you back in rupees, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We ended up going to the rug factory. We actually started with a block printing demonstration. At this particular moment, I think the universe was looking out for me because I was starting to get into a bit of an OCD spiral, and I needed something to shake me out of it, and the universe provided me with that thing to break my concentration so I could focus back on the present moment. So we were going to go talk about textiles, and there was a long table, and I wanted a good shot to see whatever I was doing so I could film whatever was going on. But then the person who was waiting was like, oh, Becky, come here. Come next to me, Becky, because I was wearing my name tag. When the group was ready, he's like, well, I'm going to show you how we do block printing here on the fabric, and Becky's going to help me today. So I actually got pulled to be a volunteer, which is like one of my favorite things in the world is when that happens. He introduced himself. His name was B2. Very easy to remember. And he was explaining the block printing. He showed us a technique that's very common in printmaking, where you have the same stamp or the same designs, but you stamp each one with a different color and they overlay in a different way. So he had an elephant, and he told me that I was going to help him stamp the elephant. Basically, he coated it in the ink for me, and then he had me help place it on the elephant, on the middle of the little white square of fabric, and I put it down, and he said bang it 3 times. So I gave it like 3 good hits, turning my hand into a bit of a hammer, and he was like, oh yeah, that'll work. I guess it didn't need to be quite that hard, but I wanted to make sure it was a good impression. I took it out, and we had this nice little display of an elephant, and then he did another stamp that got the edge of the elephant saddle. The 3rd stamp got the decorations around the elephant in the middle of the elephant saddle, and the last one, which he had me place all by myself, I had the line up at the bottom of the elephant foot. So I got the colors in. Some of them were a little bit outside of the line, but it adds to the charm. He says that they often print 4 through 9 colors on the same piece. Usually, in order to make sure that the colors are nice, they let the colors dry before they put on the 2nd color. We didn't do it in this case because it was a demonstration that needed to happen within a short amount of time. But yeah, he had this little piece there. So that was the elephant that I did. Afterwards, I showed off the elephant to the group. The group was very excited to see it. There's another worker there, and B2 led us towards what he called the magic water. So the magic water was mixed with an oxidizer, and I think there was some indigo mixed in there too, but it wasn't quite as obvious. But there was an oxidizer, and it changed the color. So the elephant was originally orange, and B2 made the joke, it looks like a camel color-wise. And he's like, not the shape, the color. Because our elephant has someone riding on it. He dipped it in and the orange turned green. And he's like, you would think like washing this, like what happens with the wash? But right after it went into the magic water solution, he was able to rub it. He had us rub it and nothing moved. So he said at the end of our trip when this was dry that I could take it with me. So I was looking forward to take it. He mentioned other people, they would make more and other people would be able to take one home, but I'm not sure that happened. This is super, super cool. I haven't done printmaking in a while and I'm pretty thrilled that I got to do it. Then afterward, he took us right inside and he showed us the different parts of a carpet. With their carpets in a square inch, which is pretty dense, what they do is they have this huge loom. It's very similar to how the women were doing it in Kenya. They have this huge loom and they have a ton of yarn from everywhere. They make rugs with predominantly 2 different types of fibers, which is silk and camel wool. The camel wool is rough when you're using it, but it becomes much softer after you wash it because like human hair is rough because it's saturated with oil. But then after you wash it, it becomes soft. Same thing happens to camel wool. So they have this chart that is in front of them and they're looking at the chart and they're tying knots to it and the knots are going down. So the knots are in a place where they can't be cut into. It produces a smooth back on the rug. There were 2 people working on rugs when we were there. And one of the other ladies, when she was there, she asked, can I buy some yarn from you? And he was like, well, if you tell me what color you want, I'll just give it to you. So she was like, red. So he found her a red skein and she was able to take some of the red skein home. I didn't ask for yarn. I felt like I already had a lot of special attention on me, but I was able to feel the yarn and it was relatively rough. You could see the people who were working on it, they were knotting the yarn and then they were like stuffing it down. So then we came up to a guy who was standing there with a torch and we were taught something about rugs with a little bit of a demonstration that we didn't know. If you want to test the quality of a rug, you need to burn it, which was like, wait, what? As it turns out, from what we saw, if the rug is made of all natural materials, it's not gonna burn, which was like, apparently some shops don't allow you to burn their rug. And B2 said that if a shop does that, don't buy from them because it means that the material is synthetic. And if it's synthetic, it's going to fuse together, which I'm familiar with that phenomena. I remember that happening with parachute cord. But all natural yarn, if it's so densely packed like that, it actually works as like a fire retardant. It just occurred to me why wool is being sold to use as insulation for housing if it's that well at not burning. But you could smell the smell of singed hair. After the guy had burned it with the torch, he just took a brush and he brushed away the soot and it was good. Then we saw another guy give the rug a wash in order to deal with any dirt that may come from the singeing process or just making sure that the yarn is clean and soft and fuzzy. The guy just poured water on it and then he scraped it. It's basically the process that you see in those YouTube videos where people do ASMR of rug washing, where they get a really dirty rug and they wash it clean. This rug wasn't terribly dirty, but you could tell how much the rug changed when the guy scraped across and how much the color popped back out. From there, we were brought up the stairs to a room where they were preparing to mail the rugs out. So the rugs are obviously very heavy, they're very big, and they're not easy to carry in your suitcase on the way home, so they will mail it for you, and it's included in the price. The shop does not have a website. It's very hard for them to keep their inventory on the website because the yarn colors are always changing, but they make a very good business and they're able to sell the rugs cheaper than what other countries are able to sell them for, because a lot of other countries around the world, they end up making these rugs by machine and they have to pay a lot for the human labor. In India, because of the huge amount of population, labor is cheaper, so they can afford to spend more time paying money to people to do this. They are provided rugs from 800 families. It's a bit of a co-op of how they do this. The way that they pay money for this is, since a single rug can take 8 months to do because it's so much work, they will be paid by length. There's one supervisor who takes care of 50 families. They'll measure how much they'll do and then they'll give them money every 2 weeks based on how much measured length that they've done. So that way people are able to make a living based off of helping to make all these rugs. Compared to other shops that we've been to in this trip, they told us there was no obligation to buy, but we could choose to buy if we want because they understood that they made a super quality product and their main goal was to make sure that we had fun. Not necessarily that they were going to make a profit, that they wanted to enjoy their guests, which was a nice refreshing attitude from having to deal with the hawkers earlier this morning. We ended up seeing people rolling up the rugs in this plastic wrapping, and then we saw a woman working in the warehouse and she was sitting on a rug and she had a pair of what she was doing was checking the rugs to make sure that all the colors were where they were supposed to be. Because when people are following a graph, they are following a particular pattern, and sometimes the design that they make, they put a wrong color where it's not supposed to be. So they don't undo any part of the rug because they don't want to mess with the integrity of the back. But what they will do is they have someone go check your work after it comes to the warehouse, and if the color's in the wrong place, they'll take a pair of snips and they'll cut off the top so the other yarn that's around it will fill in the area and you don't even know that it's there, which is impressive to me. Super impressive. B2 also decided to show us that the rugs were very resistant to getting cut in general. He took a pair of scissors and he ran it through the rug and it was perfectly fine. He said machine-made rugs wouldn't be able to survive this, but our rugs can. And it's really given me a new appreciation in general to just how durable these rugs are. No wonder these were super prized by people of power in the past. This is a legitimate amount of hard work that definitely deserves to be valued, yeah? So after that, we were brought into a room and we were told we could touch the rugs on the wall, and there was a bunch of rugs on the wall to take a seat. We were told that along the two walls here, it was a camel wool rug, and right behind us were silk, on this wall here were silk rugs. And I remember touching it, it was so soft. You would expect rugs to be hard. Like usually when I picture a rug, I picture it being super rough because my instinct is to think back to the rug that was in the row house of my younger years before the age of 8. The entire thing was covered in this rough green carpet and I can still picture that sensation on my chin. But these rugs were super soft. You would stand on them and you wouldn't even go down. We were given some more information about the rugs, especially about the families that make them. We were told that we were going to get shown some rugs today. They also had some drinks for us. So they offered water and he said, we had this traditional Indian drink here. It's a rum. It's like you can try a little bit of the rum and if the rum's too strong for you, we'll come along with Coke. So I was like, yeah, let's try some rum. They poured a little bit and then the Coke guy was coming around pretty soon after. So I decided to take a taste to see, do I need the Coke? And it was strong. It was good, but it was strong. It was like, yes, I need some Coke, please. And the Coke balanced the rum perfectly, which is probably why rum and Coke is such a popular drink. But it almost tasted like cognac. It reminded me of drinking cognac. And then they're going around with Kingfisher beer. Originally I said no to the Kingfisher beer, but they had a whole bottle left. And at first I was asked for the beer and I said no, but then someone else tried it and she said, ooh, I'm not a beer drinker, but I like this beer. I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, it's not yeasty. She said, you want to take a, and I was like, yeah. So I took a sip and it's like, oh, that's not bad. So when he was asking, it's like, yeah, you know what? I'll try it. I'll have some. I said, just a small amount. B2 disregarded that and poured me a full glass. Almost went to the top and it's like, okay, so I'm drinking it through the entire time. To be honest, it was one of the best beers I'd ever tasted. If you had told me this morning I would have drunk a beer before the day was over, I would have been surprised. Then started the of the rugs, and that was just such a meditative experience. He had his warehouse guys come in and they would unfurl the rugs, they would turn them around so you could see the yarn change colors, the shadows were different. I was just so entranced just by on the rugs and seeing the pattern that came out. He started with the biggest rugs and he got progressively smaller and smaller and smaller. They didn't pick the rugs back up off the floor. They were laying them on top of each other. There was a traditional Ribblr design that showed up in several of them. There's a modern abstract rug, which still was an intense amount of work for something that was probably a hard thing to create. because the more traditional designs, you can at least see the design as you go along and not have to be more abstract about it. The person who's ahead of our tour group, she is a more abstract artist, so I'm thinking like, oh, this is probably the type of rug that she would make if she did this thing. But right as they were unfurling the rugs, like one person saw a rug and she's like, that one's mine. They were like, yeah, congratulations to the gentle lady who decided to buy this rug. And they were clapping. They had us clap every time that someone bought a rug, which is pretty cool. So I'm looking at these and I'm absolutely admiring the artwork. The price they were asking was absolutely fair, but I also knew the bigger ones were not within my budget. The 6x9, which was the biggest size that they had, outside of India that would be selling for $6,000 to $9,000, and here in India they're able to sell that rug for $3,000. This is in US dollars, this is not in rupees. And it's like, wow, that's a good deal. That's impressive. They encouraged us to walk all over the rugs. I was taking pictures galore. I resisted the temptation, but I was very tempted to lie on one of them and pretend it to be a snow angel. But yeah, I was super thrilled. And then I realized that there were smaller rugs in the back. I found one that was 2 feet by 3 feet, which was like doormat size. And it's like, it found out it was $190. I was like, okay, I can afford this. And I got a very nice design. Because it's so small, they let me just take it home. I didn't have to pay for packaging, so they packed it up for me really nice. But you can see the design through it a little bit. It's a nice geometric design. It reminds me of knitting color work. And I got wool. I didn't get the silk one because I figured the wool would be cheaper because it's a cheaper fabric in general than silk. It's a lot easier to shear camel than it is to grow silkworm cocoons. And a little bit later on, I didn't realize I was supposed to have a certificate of authenticity, but this has a certificate of authenticity too. So I have one for my rug now. I have a rug now. It's like, you wouldn't expect to be getting so excited about rugs. And then after I got my rug, I was done looking at the rugs quite as much. I knew I had what I wanted. So I just sat and watched for a while. I talked with the person next to me and like drank a little bit more of the beer. While I was waiting, like B2 came up to me and he ended up giving me this nice scarf, which absolutely gorgeous. And I could tell from how it looks that this was block printed because some of the colors are outside of the outline, which is a very nice gesture on his part. So when they gave us the rugs, they gave them to us in these nice reusable bags. I can see myself really using this when I get back home. Become a nice carry around bag. But then after we were done with the rugs, we were guided downstairs to another fabric shop. In addition to all the rugs that they have upstairs, they also sold clothing. They sold women's saris. They sold clothing for the men. They had a section called ready-mades, which kind of reminded me of Are You Being Served? Like they had pajamas, they had nice dresses, they had tablecloths, they had pashmina shawls. But the thing that caught my eye was the fabric bolts on the wall. So you couldn't necessarily reach for the fabric bolts, you had to ask. But they had it in different materials. So they had them in silk, they had it in silk and a cotton mix, and they had it in 100% cotton. And I saw the fabric bolts and I thought, I'm gonna get fabric for mom. So I went to the 100% cotton because I know that's the material she really likes working with. And I found her some lovely fabric. I got her a meter each so she has enough to play with without me buying too much. It was $10 a meter. Considering that this looks like it's block printed in the same technique that we saw the demonstration on before, I think that's a relatively fair price. But I finished relatively quickly with my shopping and I just had to wait for everyone else. After a while, I decided to just sit down instead of just walking around once I'd seen what everything else was because I already knew exactly what I wanted. And they came around and gave us Masala chai. It was a different type of tea. It's the first time I've actually enjoyed drinking hot tea, which is impressive. I've been trying to enjoy drinking hot tea for years, so I have to remember it's masala chai. It was amazing. I had a little bit of it. One of the ladies next to me was like, "Are we about to leave soon?" And B2 was like, are you ready to go back to the hotel? She's like, no, I actually want to know if I have enough time for a kingfisher. So he had a kingfisher bottle brought for her. I was like, wow, this shop is being the consummate host. So we were able to talk and chat about the different art form types and whatnot. He noticed one of the ladies wasn't sitting down. She's like, that chair is too low for me. So he got a higher stool for her. It was a very good visit. I would say the rug shop was the best part of the day today. After that, we drove back to the hotel. Someone checked the election news. No one on the bus was celebrating. Everyone felt bleh about it, from what I could tell. So then we came home to the hotel room and I just went up to my room right away. A little bit later on, I went to supper. I decided to just go for a buffet today. I ended up having teppanyaki. They had a staff member there who made the teppanyaki for me. So I got a pineapple kebab to go with it. It was with noodles. I had a choice of rice or noodles, and then he chose everything else that went in it. He also asked if I wanted it to be spicy or not, and I was like, no, I don't need it to be spicy. But the dude who put my teppanyaki together, it was a very meditative type of experience for me, just watching him do it. He was an artist with it. And it was very, very good when I ate it. I also went up to another station. It's called like a chat station, and someone was there. I was like, what type of food is this? So he showed me like a bunch of these balls that I had seen in previous days. It's the ones that I wish were like a thicker bread, but they were super thin and wafy. Some of them look like madeleines. And it turned out they're meant to be filled with food. That's why they're hollow. I didn't know that. The chat is their version of a dumpling. So he ended up putting 2 different ones together for me, and I was like, oh, thank you. Both of the ones he put together for me were a tad bit spicy. And also they made my hands sticky because he doused them in the liquid. I was very happy to try it. So I ended up getting that, and I had some bread too. But then when I went back for dessert, I started talking with these 2 Indian guys. So instead of going back to my table with my dessert, I asked them if I could join them there, and I had a nice conversation with them. And they are both in Jaipur from Delhi to be part of a shooting competition. One of them actually has won the gold for India twice in the Olympics for shooting. Just like, wow, that's impressive. The other one was also part of the Olympics, if I remember that well. Yeah, we had a very pleasant conversation. They told me more about India, and they told me what desserts to try. There are 2 desserts that look tasty, but because of the name, I could not touch them. Because even though the name was not in English, it contained a word in English that would just put me off food. But I did try the one food that they recommended, even though it had coconut on it, because they said it was good. And I also tried out kasari for the first time, I think it was. It's basically a dairy thing with saffron dyed milk, and there's a little yogurt dumpling in the middle there. It was pretty cool. So yeah, that's my day today. It has been a very long, action-packed day. Tomorrow we have a lot planned, although they're letting us sleep in. I'm excited to see the artisans, but what I'm not excited about is the fact that my period started today. I packed a lot of tampons, but tampons are going to be hard to deal with when I'm out in the field there. So I ended up asking the hotel for pads, and room service delivered some for me. So I'm very, very grateful to them for preventing what could be a bleed out by the end of the week. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be switching. The exception of one of the pants, all the pants I brought with me are light colored, which feels like a mistake. Yeah, that is my day today. And it has been quite a day.
The name of king was Savai Jai Singh II. That's why the name is Jaipur. Very beautiful heritage boutique city. When you see this city, you will forget everything. Yeah, now you are in the real India. Boutique, everything is beautiful.
For us, this is a very important process. That is called. The castle checking of design, I mean to say downstairs you saw the looms where they were making knots. This is 4 by 6 feet size rack. It takes 4 months for a person to make the carpet of that size. Damage the carpet. It's not. Just see the color, that is the most important.
How much is that weight?
The weight, about around 30 kilos, 60 pounds. Okay, now I request you to kindly. Enjoy.
Okay, that one's mine.
Okay, write your name on the rack and applause for her, please.